Welcome to the Haunted Beard, everybody. My name is Jake. Thank you for joining me. Today, I want to give you my review for Ash. This is a sci-fi horror thriller film starring Aaron Paul and Eliza Gonzales, directed by Flying Lotus. I've got some thoughts here for you, so let's get into it. In Ash, a woman wakes up on a distant planet and finds the crew of her space station viciously killed. Her investigation into what happened sets in motion a terrifying chain of events. And this is director Flying Lotus's second feature-length film. I haven't seen his first film. However, in addition to that, he also directed one of the VHS segments in VHS 99, I believe, which I enjoyed fairly well. I thought it stood out as something pretty unique. In addition to being a director, he is also a musician, of which I am pretty much entirely unfamiliar with his musical work. And it's very obvious. I mean, all you have to see is like a single frame of this movie to know that he clearly has an eye for visuals. The visual presentation here stands out very much. I think somewhat reminiscent of like a Panos Cosmatos kind of thing. Just very, saturated colors, very colorful reds, blues, purples, pinks, things like that. Very shadowy, nice lighting. Just all of the visual presentation to it is very well done. You really get that sensation and that feeling, whether it be visually and just with the production value and the production design, just kind of getting that feeling that you really are on an alien planet. In addition to that, the music and the sound design, I think, are also quite effective. The sound really plays a significant part, whether it be from the musical score or just the sound effects and the overall sound design. From a visual perspective, from an audio type of perspective, the film is executed at a very high level and is all very effective. However, that is really only kind of half the battle when it comes to a movie. And I would say it's kind of the easier half, because I come to a movie first and foremost with how's the story and how are the characters. And for me, Ash left a bit to be desired in terms of the story and quite a bit to be desired in terms of the characters. And unfortunately, I don't think he does himself any favors in terms of how he sets up the story. As, you've got Eliza Gonzalez's character wakes up and the film starts off with her seeing the crew in the space station dead. She's got amnesia basically and is trying to figure out what in the world happened. Who am I? What is going on here? And the thing about this is, if you're going to have a character who's suffering from amnesia, you really kind of hinder yourself in terms of character development. And the film really doesn't give us any sort of character development. Even when some of her memories start coming back to her and she kind of is able to start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, there's just not much, not only to her character, but really to any of the other characters. And so the character work here and the character development and the depth is just very, very thin. And so the thing is, though, if you're going to do that, if you're going to kind of focus less on the character growth and development, you've really got to come through with a really strong story. And again, unfortunately, the story for me overall was just a little bit underwhelming. And I think one of the main reasons why I was underwhelmed by the story is that the story is told in a structure where it uses flashbacks to reveal and give information. And it's another example that, for me, flashbacks are just kind of a cheap and lazy way to give exposition and give information to your audience, to where it's basically like, the characters just kind of, walking through the film and things are happening, and then all of a sudden cue a flashback because the audience needs to know information now. So let's just jump to previously and give them some information. And it just feels so forced, and it doesn't feel like the story unfolds organically. That it's basically, well, we don't really know how else to give the audience the information that they need, so let's just cut to a flashback. And I understand you kind of have to use that in a way because, again, you've got a character who has amnesia and sometimes she'll see something and it will trigger a flashback. I get that, but they go to that well quite a bit. And again, I just, in general, am not a big fan of using flashbacks to sort of drive your story forward and give us exposition and explain to us all the things that are happening. It just feels like such a cheap and ineffective way to tell your story. We get a big reveal that happens I don't know, roughly midway in the movie where our main character finds this videotape and watches the video. And again, it just seems so easy to give us that information. Oh, here just happens to be this, it's like this drone footage that she stumbles upon, and it just explains a whole bunch of stuff. And it just feels like the most kind of lazy and uninteresting way to present to us information and to give us this reveal that happens in the story. The film also too does this sort of jump scare technique where, again, it involves these flashbacks where our main character will see something and it will kind of just trigger this memory. And we get this brief, like 1 second cutaway to this, very bloody, gory, graphic image where, she's recalling the violence that occurred. And it does this so many times to just try to jolt us and jump scare us by throwing this bloody, gory image on the screen real quick with a blast of a sound effect. And again, it's just kind of this cheap, ineffective way to sort of try to scare the audience. It just doesn't really work all that well. In addition to that, there are a few things here that I feel like either A, didn't make sense, or B, weren't fully explained to where I was a little bit confused. Some of the stuff gets into spoiler territory, so I won't get into any specifics, but there are some things that happened that I didn't really understand why a character was doing what they did or why they reacted the way that they did. There's definitely a couple instances that kind of stretch believability too much. A couple instances where I felt like characters made stupid decisions. One of the things that I can talk about is our main character, Eliza Gonzales. She has to keep putting on these little patches on her neck, and they have something to do with her moods and her mental state. But to me anyways, that the film never really explained what exactly those did and why she had to use those. So that was something I was a little bit unclear on. And so there was just kind of a handful of things in the film along those lines that kind of bothered me. I can appreciate when filmmakers are clearly inspired and influenced by films that have come before. And I think for the most part, most filmmakers are to some degree, and they kind of use, just some nods and some homage to some of the films that have come before that have inspired them. However, I think there's a fine line between, trying to pay some respects to the films that have influenced you, but then going so far into it that you're going to be very clearly compared to the movies that have influenced this film. There's definitely some Alien in this movie. There's definitely some The Thing in this movie, which are both great films, and you can see the influence they had in this. However, it's almost like too much of an influence to where you're just going to really strongly compare those films to this film, and this film just doesn't hold a candle to either one of those. And so it's like, if I want those sort of vibes, I'm going to just go watch Alien and The Thing again. And so that's the thing. There's kind of that fine line between, here's what I've been inspired by, but if you make it too much like those movies, you're going to get overly compared to them, and you're never going to live up to those movies at all. So unfortunately for me, Ash is kind of another classic example of, style over substance. And I know that that's really an overused phrase, but it's another one that I think is pretty applicable. The style here is pretty great. There is a scene towards the end of the film where there's like this brain surgery type sequence that I was really the only kind of visual scene from a visual perspective that didn't really work very well. It just didn't look all that great. However, I will give the film some credit as the climactic sequence involves some pretty cool practical gore and special effects that I really liked. And so I will give the film some props there. And in addition to all that, like I mentioned, the visuals by and large are pretty great. It's a great movie to look at. But it just left quite a bit to be desired in terms of how it told its story. And really just the characters are pretty thin and pretty flat for me. So, overall, I'm going to go 5 out of 10, I think, for Ash. It's a style over substance kind of thing for me. Unfortunately, just the substance and the story and the characters just weren't there enough for me. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Hit me up down below. Let me know your thoughts. Would be very curious to hear your guys' take on this one. That is all I got for you, though. Thank you so much for watching. Greatly appreciate it. If you got anything out of this video, go ahead and do me a favor and do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard.